Bonus Family began as an alternative, a more positive way to discuss a step family. I lived in a step family, and I was very close to and I hesitate to even call them stepchildren. I treated them like my biological children. It's exactly the same because I had biological children as well. And one time, my bonus daughter, and we were with somebody at their house, and I introduced her as my stepdaughter, and her face just went blank. And I said, "Oh, I didn't feel good saying that either, but daughter wasn't appropriate because I respected her mother and I couldn't call her my daughter. That would upset her mother. So step didn't seem right. So we thought of a new name. And it was actually her mom and I sat down and figured out a name because a bonus is an extra. It's a reward for a job well done. And that was the whole premise behind it.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about bonus families. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Jann Blackstone. Dr. Blackstone is a behavioral scientist, author, and the founder and director of the Bonus Families nonprofit organization. You can reach Dr. Blackstone at her website, bonusfamilies.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Jann. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am so grateful that you're here. And this conversation and this topic is personal for me, and I'm sure it will be for so many who are listening. I have one daughter who married a divorcee with 4 children. So on her wedding day, she became a mother of 4.
Yeah.
And her husband and his ex have a very adversarial, toxic relationship.
Oh.
And I have another daughter who's been divorced for a couple years, and now her ex is engaged. And my daughter's heart is broken that she has to share her children 50-50 with a complete stranger.
Oh. Yeah.
And so all of these things, I mean, it's real, it's personal, and it is so widespread. There are so many people in the United States, and I'm sure throughout the world, who are dealing with trying to integrate families. So I appreciate that you're here and you can give us some guidance. So where do we start?
There's actually more bonus families than there are conventional 2-parent families. I used to work for Superior Court years ago. Well, now I make it sound like it's so many years ago, a couple of years ago. And I did research into how many of my clients were married and how many were unmarried. And it didn't really matter in terms of custody, but everybody was trying to blend, and I hesitate to use the word blend, combine families. And the percentage in my particular case was 68% were unmarried, 32% were married. And everybody had the same problems.
Wow. Okay. So some people listening might not understand what the word bonus families means. So can we start there and explain what it is and why you chose to give it a new name?
Well, bonus family is just it began as an alternative, a more positive way to call a step family, to discuss a step family. I lived in a step family, and I was very close to and I hesitate to even call them stepchildren, but it was difficult because I lived with them week on, week off, week with us, week with their mother. And I would sit up with them with the flu, and they'd get sick on my shoes, and I treated them like my biological children. It's exactly the same because I had biological children as well. And one time, my bonus daughter was very sick, and I sat up with her all night. And the next day, of course, as children are, she was fine. Everything was great. It was a 24-hour bug. And we were with somebody at their house, and I introduced her as my stepdaughter, and her face just went blank. And I said, "Oh, I didn't feel good saying that either, but daughter wasn't appropriate because I respected her mother and I couldn't call her my daughter. That would upset her mother." So step didn't seem right because also she had told me at another time that when she introduced me as her stepmother, her friends automatically didn't think that she liked me, and that was wrong. So we thought of a new name. And it was actually her mom and I sat down and figured out a name because a bonus is an extra. It's a reward for a job well done. And that was the whole premise behind it.
Isn't that fascinating how just the word, the name, it creates kind of a mental picture in our mind? I mean, we
Mhm.
can even go to Cinderella, where we have the stepmother and the stepsisters, and the sound of that is automatically, we don't like you. You don't belong. In fact, we're going to treat you
You don't
differently
belong is
and
probably,
cruelly.
sorry, I spoke over you, but we don't belong is really the premise. And bonus families is inclusive. That's what it is. It's all inclusive and it's a collaborative effort. The way I always say it is you can't have too many people love your children, and don't get involved in a comparison or, you like them more or any of that. It's we are all here for the children. And that's the
Wow.
premise.
I would love for it to be that way, and it should be that way. Let's think about the children and their needs and what they want. So, even something as simple as changing a word can have a huge impact. So that when I introduce, would be my bonus grandchildren, using that term is like, wow, look at these wonderful extra grandchildren that I get because my daughter married someone who already had some children. Now, this is a bonus to me. That's beautiful. Oh, what a
Bonus
lovely
to
place to
them,
start.
because this gives you an opportunity to love more people. I mean, that's what I was just telling my partner. You have the opportunity to be a role model for children, and take advantage of that. It doesn't have to be either or that's not my biological grandchild, or that's not my biological child, so I'm going to put them over there. Um, it's it's our job. Our kids did not ask for their parents to break up. So it's our job as their parents to create an atmosphere that's seamless if we can, where they can go back and forth. The courts are telling them they have to live in two different homes. So it's up to us to make their life as easy as possible.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of usually people divorce because they don't like each other. And after their divorce, they still don't like each other. So how do we get along and remember to put the children first when I'm working with someone that I don't like?
You know that's what I tell people all the time is we're setting precedent now. If you teach your children how to resolve conflict with somebody that they don't like a parent, you're setting the stage for them to learn to do that with friends, with teachers that they don't get along with as they get older, bosses or supervisors. So this is not just something for your family and your home. It's something that you can set an example all the way through life. And what was the specific question that you just asked me? Because I just went off.
No, and it was perfect. I love that you brought up this is not just a skill that is going to benefit our family. This is a benefit. And as you were saying it, I thought, man, this would benefit the whole world. How to
Well,
treat
it's learning.
people that we disagree with and maybe even don't like in a way that is respectful. So that's a really big deal. So, how do we do it?
Well, in bonus families, the criteria is always using the children as the deciding factor. If you take your own self-interest out of it, because a lot of it is all based on the past and what has happened in the past, and neither of the parents can say they're sorry enough. If you think about it, if you've been hurt or if you've been betrayed, you can't say you're sorry enough. So I tell people to let's start from the beginning. Let's rewrite this entire script and and come at each other as partners in raising our children, not ex-partners of being lovers, but partners in raising our children. So the conflict resolution always uses the kids as the criteria. So you stand back and you say, okay, am I making this decision because it's better for our children, or is it because you make me so mad that I want to say no just on principle? And once you remove yourself out of it, if you're really being honest, it's really easy.
Wow. And it should be. And yet, often, quite the reverse is true.
When
Rather
we're all,
than
yeah.
thinking about the needs of the children, oftentimes parents use the children as a way to punish their ex. And that's very, very harmful for the child.
Well, and especially if the children know that you feel that way about their father or their mother, they won't want to come back to your house. And that's something to take a look at, because if they know you're bad mouthing their father or their mother, they'll start to pick sides. And also they personalize it. If you're saying something bad about them, you're saying something bad about the child. They know they're half mom and they're half dad. So if you don't like my dad, you don't like part of me. And a child will find a reason to personalize the bad mouthing. Maybe if I was a better kid, my parents wouldn't have gotten a divorce. Maybe if I cleaned my room and got better grades, they wouldn't have fought so much. It's all the same premise.
And that's so normal and yet so sad.
It's really sad. Yeah. And so many people, I mean, rarely do people stay together. And everybody is struggling with, how do I combine families? How do I meet somebody new? How do I introduce this into my child's life? It's a universal problem.
It is a universal problem. So let's talk about bad mouthing a little bit more in case there's someone who doesn't really understand what that looks like or what that means. Can you explain what you mean when you say bad mouthing?
Well, I'm going to tell you a quick story. This is about my grandson. Um, I was driving someplace and he was sitting in the back seat. And I said to him, he was joking about his mom and I and how we get along. And we're jokesters and we tease each other. And I said, yeah, we do. But I said, but daddy is kind of shy. If you see him at a party, he stays to himself. He doesn't talk a lot. And my grandson is very sensitive, got tears in his eyes, and these little tears are starting to go down his face. And I'm going, honey, do you think shy is bad? And he goes, yeah, my daddy talks to me. And I had to explain to him what shy was. So the context, did I think I was bad mouthing his dad by saying shy? I didn't, but I had to explain it to my grandson. I had to call his mother up and say, this is going to be happening. You're going to have to reinforce it. That's the kind of thing that we have to be aware of. It's not just calling somebody a name or being snide. It's the context in which the child hears you talking about the parent. Bad mouthing could be tone of voice.
Mm.
So we really have to be careful, because the first thing that people that really the first thing that the child does is start to personalize it, gets right in the middle. Then you'll start hearing, I don't want to go to your house. I don't want to go back there. And the reason is they don't want to hear the conflict. They don't want to hear that. Not necessarily they don't want to see their parent. They just don't want to feel like that when they're around their parent.
Wow. Boy, that's something to remember when you feel tempted to say something unkind, to just bite your tongue because it's hurting the child. It really made me think when you said when you're bad mouthing your spouse or ex, you're bad mouthing the child because they know that that's half of them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's super important to remember. I think that little golden nugget, that understanding will help us to be able to bite our tongue better. And it's important to know, as you mentioned, it's not just the words we speak, but the tone of voice. So there are lots of things that we need to be careful about.
And also be careful when you're talking on the phone to your friends or your sister or things or people like that, because little ears are everywhere in your home. And you could be really identifying with your sister and telling them the problems that you are feeling, and your child sitting in the other room and hears everything.
That's such a burden for children to bear.
Oh, exactly. I'm really glad you put it that way, because it really is. We think that breakups are a burden that we must bear. Consider what your children are going through. They now have to live in two homes. They may have to share a room when they didn't, or now no longer share a room. They might have to leave their dog. They might have to no longer do Little League because they've moved. Um, their pecking order may be different. They may have been the oldest, now they're the youngest. There's so many things that children, when they move in and after their parents' divorce, have to face that parents don't even think about. It's,
I think we should. I think we should think about those things to try to ease that burden, to try to comfort and support our children as best as we can.
That's that when parents often ask me, how do I tell our children that we're getting a divorce? What do we say? And the first thing I usually tell them is, first of all, do it together and don't make it adversarial. Talk to them about what children are asking is not that, oh, are you ever going to be together again? I mean, that's important, but they're looking for how it'll affect their life. Actually, physically, will I have to move? Will I have to leave my friends? How, those are the things that they want to know. Am I still going to be in Little League? Um, is daddy going to pick me up? Is mommy going to pick me up? Do I sleep at this house? What is my room going to look like? It's the things that directly impact them that they want to know about. And then, of course, that your mommy and your daddy will always continue to love you. That will never change. That's a really important component to all this, of course. But they really want to know how this new life is going to affect them.
And as you were sharing that, I'm trying to just put myself in the position of a child whose parents have just made this announcement and having all of those things run through my mind and how much stability that once was is now gone. It's like taking the rug and just yanking it out from under you. Every aspect has changed.
Every aspect for a child is changed. For the parents, it's a relief oftentimes. It may not be, but usually one person wants the divorce, the other person doesn't want the divorce. Oftentimes, you also hear people that are amicable, both want the divorce, but there's usually some sort of conflict that determines who's right and who's wrong. And children don't see it that way. Their life is completely upheaval. What's the word I'm looking for?
Uprooted, maybe?
Yeah, there you go.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk about we've gone through this scenario. We've already had the talk. Some time has passed. The kids have been going from mom's house to dad's house. They're kind of getting a routine. But then one or both of the parents start dating. So now we have a whole new mix. What kinds of things should they do? If maybe you're serious with somebody, do you tell the kids first? You tell the ex first? Who do you talk to?
Can I back up a little bit?
Yes.
Um, Whenever you read or hear from professionals about how to date and how to introduce the children, it's usually after you've met somebody serious. That's when you start getting the information. But the truth is, they need to be your former partner or their children's other parent need to be in on the dating, in the sense that they need to know that you're dating, so that when if you are dating in front of your children, I hope you're not. I hope you only introduce them when they're very serious with somebody. But the other partner, your former partner rather, needs to know that you're out there, and so that they can reinforce it. If a child comes and says, mom went out on a date, rather than get upset and say, she is, it's only been 6 months. You can say, yes, mom told me, I know she's dating. Leave it at that. You don't want to throw the other parent under the bus. So then now you're talking about when you do meet somebody serious, that's when you start to involve the children. Got to make sure that they slowly introduce the new people into the mix. The biggest thing that I can say also is don't try to change everybody to be in this little round peg. Like if you marry somebody or couple with somebody who has children, they may be completely different than your children. So accept the differences in each other's background, personalities. Use that as a positive, not as a negative. You're not blending in. What I always say is acknowledge the differences. Make that be the positive, so that the child doesn't feel like they're just lost in this sea of blending. Everybody wants to be seen.
Absolutely. So once again, I'm putting myself in the shoes of now I've got extra kids, I've got an extra parent, and they do things different than I'm used to. and the kids have been raised different than I'm
Completely
used
different.
to.
Trauma. You don't know the trauma of any, you don't know what their child's background is. So you really have to be, acceptance is really the key to make a blended family or a bonus family work. Accepting the backgrounds and the histories and the individuality and celebrating it rather than trying to put them in everybody in the same, you know, a good analogy. When you're cooking, I use this in the book. When you're cooking and when you're baking, you put the flour and the butter and you blend it all together and it becomes something completely different and homogenized. But you can't see the flour. You can't see everything. Uh, Kids don't like to be blended and lost in the homogenized kind of life of a bonus family, accepting their individuality. This person is a cheerleader. This person is good at history. This person is good at math. You don't ever use the "how come you can't be like your sister or brother," or that you'll lose them. You'll lose them.
That's terrifying. And it's so easy to do. All you have to do is not pay attention
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or
One
expect
person might
things to.
be way easier to get along with than the other. Does that mean that they're wrong? No, they might have had a different background. Let's look at that. Let's work with them.
I guess that includes getting to know someone. I mean, how can you really appreciate them? To just have someone, kids to just show up and then, I don't know, expect them to be a certain way when you don't even know them. I
Exactly.
imagine that's not going to go over very well at all.
No, they resent it. They resent it. When you're seen as a child and even as an adult, of course, when you're seen and you feel seen, you're much more inclined to become a member of the club. But if you aren't seen, you reject it.
Hmm. That makes me think of some of Brene Brown's comments about the difference between
Love her.
belonging and what was the other word? Fitting in, something like that. Where one you have to be the same, and the other is you're accepted as yourself.
Individual. If you read the book that we're talking about, the Bonus Family Handbook, I use the word care as kind of a symbol of how to use what to refer to. Communication, acceptance is number two. Respect and empathy. Use those four things as your basis, and in all relationships, it will be easier. But specifically in bonus families, communication. Because when I work with clients, when I say, okay, what's your goal? The first thing that they will tell me is we have terrible communication. We need to improve communication. And I ask them, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? It's a communication breakdown. So how do we do that? Acceptance is just being seen as an individual. Respect is respecting that person for an individual. And empathy is putting yourself in their shoes. Don't ask them to do something you wouldn't do.
And it sounds so simple. And yet putting it into practice is a little trickier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Takes years sometimes. But if you use love as the guide and not judgment, it's much easier.
Wow. Well, that's good advice for just life. Can I go back to your communication question? Because when you say communication, what does that look like? And the funny thing is, even when we're saying we want to improve our communication, isn't very good communication because we're not clearly expressing what it is we're hoping for. So what would be a good model of communication between former spouses?
This is a great segue into the book. I have something called the bonus family model, which is for conflict resolution. And really, what it is it's 4 steps. The first step is identify the problem. So if you've got a problem, you say, okay, this is the problem. Come to the table with a solution. Don't just drop a problem in somebody's lap because they don't know it's a problem. So then it puts them on the spot. They get frustrated and your communication will spin out of control. So as a co-parent, and maybe even in work, I mean, that's where I learned this is when you walk into a business meeting, you offer a problem and you come with a solution. This is the problem, and this is how I think it will be solved. Don't be afraid to negotiate from that point. The third step is negotiation. And oftentimes with co-parents, they're so used to saying no that they don't say things like, well, you know what? I can't pick them up at 4 o'clock because that was the solution, but I can at 3. Can I pick them up a little bit earlier? And that would make it easier. And then now you're negotiating. Yeah, 3 o'clock's better. It'll work. And so then you've got major compromise, and that's how you problem solve. It's the same way in business. You treat your relationship with your co-parent like a business relationship. Keep the emotion out of it. Just be very succinct. And that's the way it works. But the biggest thing I can tell you is come to the table with a solution. Because then you have some place to negotiate. You have some place to start. And don't be afraid to say no. And don't be afraid to negotiate.
That
Be
is
afraid.
amazing. How beautiful. Once again, we have something that is simple, but not necessarily easy because it depends on the way that we've interacted before. Can we treat each other with respect? Can we communicate as, as people, not trying to win? Can we negotiate? Can we work together? And if we can, it's going to be better for me too. And I think that matters because sometimes people think there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. And so I have to fight all the time so that I can be the winner instead of saying, you know what, we are both on team raising our kids. So
Kid.
let's find something here that works. I love it. So your book sounds amazing. I can't wait to get a copy.
I'll send you one.
Oh, thank you. I am super looking forward to that.
It's kind of, I mean, it's a conventional self-help book in the sense that it has, starts at one place and ends at the other place. But the way that I laid it out was we all Google stuff now. We all Google ideas and concepts. And so the book's 380 pages long, and it's the culmination of my entire career. But so I set it up so the index is very succinct. And so if you look up a subject, you can just then go read it. And it's broken down into almost articles, questions and answers. And the way that I wrote it is I started asking my question at the beginning of the book and just kept asking the questions all the way to the end. So it starts out with co-parenting and then moves into dating and then moves into moving in together and meeting somebody and then setting up house and then dealing with extended family. So it's the whole process. And then holidays and how to handle holidays and weddings and funerals. And then, the last chapter is just the culmination of backsliding, because we all do. Part of recovery is it is backsliding. So it's called blunders and backslides. And you just go through the mistakes we make, like making our kids messengers. Tell your dad, this, tell your mom this. Now the child has to think, well, what do I say to them? They're going to fight if I pass that on. So then they summarize things, change it, don't say something. And that's how you put your kids in the middle. So that's the way the book is laid out. And it's has lots and lots of stories, firsthand stories 30 years of stories of dealing with, and nothing's really changed. Nothing's really changed.
There's just more of it.
Just more of it. Yeah, there's just more. But I mean, nothing's changed since 1989 in terms of that's when I met my child's father, and that's when we first started the whole blending process, and it's just all encompassing for people who have remarried or recoupled. Because you and I were talking before we got on this podcast. The majority of people don't marry anymore, at least in the United States. They don't marry. Having children is not a prerequisite to marriage. Let's put it that way. Almost over 40% of all children are born to single parents. That's a crazy statistic, isn't it?
It's a lot.
Yeah. So all of these principles apply to everyone who's married somebody or living with somebody who has children, or if you have children, these are all things that we have to deal with, all of us.
So when I get the book, do I read from cover to cover, or do I just, oh, I've got a question and look in the index, or do I do both? Do I
I
do
would
I
I would do both. The co-parenting chapter is the first chapter. And the reason I did that was because the premise, once you nail down co-parenting, you just import that information and those tools into your bonus family and problem solving in a bonus family. So I always start out with co-parenting. Get that down, then you're fine. You're cooking with gas on that one. But if you don't co-parent well, then it's difficult to use the tools. That it's difficult to uh, you know, keep everybody on the same keel. Then the rules are different at homes. The kids are confused. You want, I mean, we all want to be autonomous, especially when you break up with somebody. You want to, okay, I don't want to deal with that person ever again. But your child does.
hmm
So that's why we have to try to reach out to each other and just be cordial, be polite, and be respectful. Answer your texts. That type of thing. Don't avoid them. The question was, do you read the book? Yes. Read the first chapter and then go through it chapter by. It's really just chronological. After you break up and co-parent, then you would start dating, and it talks about dating right from the beginning. Then you meet somebody and move in with them. Then and it's got section on marriage if you want to get married, or domestic partnerships. Some people, it's got for seniors as well, because one of the things, this book isn't just for people who have kids. What about people who are lost their spouse and are remarrying?
Right. They're not being raised in your home, and yet they are now a part of your life.
Oh, but I mean, my grandson spends the night all the time, so he's around my partner. Those are the things you have to take in consideration, is how quickly do you bring in a new partner if you're a grandparent. It's all the same. These are all things that we have to consider to make our children feel safe and secure.
And that's the goal, is to help our children feel as safe and secure as possible, because divorce or even separating, it yanks the rug out from under them. It
Oh,
takes
absolutely.
that security.
Yanks the rug out of it behind everybody.
True. It yanks the rug out from everybody, but the kids didn't choose it.
They don't choose any of it, and that's why it's our job to make their transition from house to house as seamless as possible.
Absolutely.
Another thing that a little shift in mindset. When I start to talk about dealing with your child's other parent, I always begin with mindset. What you think about prior to the conversation. If you're reiterating how terrible they were or how terrible your relationship is, you're not going to want to problem solve. So I tell everybody to. That's why we create a relationship that is right now, not dependent on the past. How we want to act now. So then the criteria for your relationship is completely different. It's your children, not what you did to each other.
Wow. So, mindset, and let's put ourselves in the present rather than rehashing the past.
Mm-hmm. And letting go of the past is different than staying in the present. Yeah, I always tell people, you don't move on, you move forward.
Ooh, will you explain the difference between those two?
Well, moving on it oftentimes puts things, I have to overcome it. I must forgive, I must. And moving forward just doesn't take the past into consideration. It keeps you in the present.
Wow, that's a beautiful distinction.
Well,
That
thank you.
gives me the freedom to be able to say, I haven't gotten over it. I'm still mad. And yet, I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to have solved all of my problems before I can do what I need to do right now in
Mm-hmm.
order to help my children to feel safe and secure as we
Perfect.
move forward.
Exactly. Exactly. And I also tell people that parents sometimes have to be the biggest actors in the world. If you're falling apart all the time, that makes your children feel unsafe. So do your best to regulate your emotions in front of your children. I'm not saying don't cry. I'm not saying don't get angry. Those are human responses. But if you're always crying, if you're always angry, you're not giving your children, you're not helping them to feel safe.
And that needs to be our primary goal, is to help the children feel safe. Wow, this has been amazing. And is there anything else you want to make sure we cover?
In the book, the Bonus Family Handbook, there are stories. There's some of them are tearjerkers. I can tell you a few of them right now that are indicators of how to co-parent. Would you
Oh,
like
yes,
me?
please. I would love that.
Um, One of my favorite stories is that there was an older couple that I was working with as a co-parenting counselor, actually a mediator during Superior Court. They came in. The mother came in with a laundry list of things that were wrong with the father. And they were older. They had met at a party. It was a one night stand. That was, they met at a party. She was 38. He was 34, and they had twins. Didn't know each other at all, and they were trying to share the kids equally. They were 8 months old. Normally, you don't see an equal custody share, not equal custody, equal joint custody at that point. You see joint custody, but the children usually live with the mother predominantly, and then the father, maybe on the weekends or slowly overnight, start to happen overnight slowly. And these two were sharing right from the beginning. And the mother was furious. They were 8 or 9 months old. She said, I think he should go make a doctor's appointment and go to the doctor and have the doctor show him how to clean little girls because they're going to get UTIs. He won't clean them properly. They come home, they're a mess. And he was actually very conscientious and didn't want to touch them. I mean, he did touch them, but he was concerned. So I looked at her and I said, why don't you teach him? Why does he have to make a doctor's appointment? They're your babies. Have them come over a half hour early and change the baby in front of them and show them how to clean her. And she looks at me with like, what? That's not my responsibility. And I said, if it's not your responsibility, whose is it? You guys are the parents. And he starts to cry. And he goes, they're my babies too. And I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. She looks at him and she goes, oh my gosh, I am really sorry. I didn't realize. She didn't realize that she could talk to the father of her child. She thought she had to be completely separate. I said, you guys can help each other. You know? And so they started to make plans right there about how she was going to help him clean the baby and show them the different nighttime routines. They hadn't done that. And he's sitting there sobbing. Why did you have to wait to come to the court to show me all these things? And it was just, you have to reach out to each other. They didn't get back together. They ever were together. They just developed a relationship to take care of their children.
And isn't that wonderful that you don't have to maybe repair your relationship with each other romantically or otherwise, but we can be co-parents
That's the deal.
because they're my babies too.
I know. I remember. I can hear him saying that. They're my babies too. I know. I know. And they're really, we were all three crying because what was so cool about it was she caught on when he said that right away. Right away. It wasn't like, I'm a better parent. It was, oh my gosh, I haven't been holding. I could help him. It was really a wonderful time.
How beautiful with just a simple shift of
All
awareness.
it is, and that's actually the segment. That's what it's like about because it talks about the mental shift of to cooperate. We're so used to saying no when you're estranged that there is a mental shift to say yes.
The mental shift to cooperate.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And that's so simple and yet so profound. That would change everything.
It doesn't change it. We're all trying to protect ourselves. I mean, disagreeing and not getting along with your co-parent is all fear-based. Either they're going to try to take him away. My child might not like me as much as they like you. They might like your house better and not want to come back. I mean, it's all fear-based. And it rarely happens. The child just loves both their parents.
Isn't that wonderful?
Hmm.
That our children can love us. And it's okay that they love someone else too. Having them love someone else doesn't take their love away from me. They're capable of loving both.
But not only that's a true statement about parents, but it's also a true statement about bonus parents. Parents have to understand that their co-parent's partner plays a huge part in their child's life. My life would not be as rich without my bonus children if I didn't have them in my life. I could not imagine. And I hope that I have impacted their life as well. And one of the reasons that it was so easy is I have very intelligent parents who loved their children over anything. And they allowed me to be a part of it and actually asked me for help. Because one of the things that, I mean, it took us a while, but I became very good friends with my bonus children's mom. And one of the openings to co-parenting as a team in the book is a story that actually happened with us. She couldn't pick the kids up because used to be administrative assistant at a very large company, and she was traveling and she's trying to organize her schedule, and she said, can you pick them up from school on this day? I know I'm going to be out of town. And she's going through this and she's all frenzied, and I said, of course, don't worry about it, just give me the schedule. And then she stops and says, Jann, how do people do this without three parents?
So if you look at it as we really are bonus parents, then we have more people who can help to care for and love our children. If
Yeah,
we cooperate rather than be,
adversarial.
adversarial, then we can
Can't have too many
support our
people love you.
kids.
Yeah. Can't have too many people love your children.
No, no. Ah, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for visiting with me today.
Gosh, it's been fun. Thank you for having me.
Oh, pleasure.
Anytime.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Richard Bach. He said, "The bond that links your true family is not one of blood, but of respect and joy in each other." Today, I invite our listeners to link our families with respect and joy, whether we're living in a single, traditional, or bonus family arrangement. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.